really fast. Give yourselves a hand. So that took, by the way, just because I think you'll get a kick out of this. So I did have this slide. But we don't need to use it, right? So awesome. So Scvngr will donate $10,000 to National Wildlife Federation because you guys just did something awesome. That was insanely fast. So give yourselves one more hand and then I'll talk about So, aside from being fun, what just happened is this is the power of communal gameplay. This is the power of two dynamics, communal gameplay and communal discovery, where you can give a large group of disconnected people a reasonably tricky problem and have it solved insanely fast with totally local action. So let's look at the analogy. We had a lack of communication. The people up here could not talk with the people back there. Up here is Boston, back there is Beijing. There was no time to communicate from front to back, but it was a problem that actually affected both of you, both front, back, left, right, wherever you were, but you couldn't communicate completely. Trading patterns. There were incredibly complex trades that went on. This just turned into a little mini Chicago Mercantile Stock Exchange, where everyone is immediately trading with people around them, doing trades that would make the masters of the universe on Wall Street totally proud with people who you've never met in seconds, and that's very cool. There were different countries. This is the analogy, that every row is its own country, across the aisle, different countries, oceans, you can't quite jump across them. I know in the real world we can, but in this world we can't. There was a different distribution of wealth. This is one of the most interesting ones. Some of you had 2 cards. A very small portion of you had 3 cards. And I know that's unfair, but that's how the game was set up. It's also analogous to the real world. There are certain distributions of wealth which are not equal. And in this game, if you had 2 cards or 3 cards, you were guaranteed to have the color you needed for your row. But it was actually better globally if you traded, if you gave some of them away. And the mechanics that move people to make that happen, to actually do something which might be less good for them in the short term, but very good for everyone in the long term, is really interesting, and communal gameplay is one of the magical dynamics that can make that happen. Restricted movement. You couldn't stand up. So we had to solve a problem which affected 3,000 people in here with only about 8 people around you. You had to work locally. There simply wasn't time to trade from front to back. Decentralized leadership. This is, again, analogous to these massive problems. There is no one person, no one government that can stand up and solve global warming. There is decentralized leadership. And so if I had stood up here and said, okay, row A, you're green, row B, you're blue, row C, you're orange, row D, you're red, we absolutely could have solved this problem. But it would have taken me a lot longer than the 60-some-odd seconds it took you guys to solve it yourself. So not only can decentralized leadership solve incredibly complex problems, it can actually solve these problems faster than centralized leadership could. And that's very, very cool. Countdown. We have countdowns on problems in the real world too. I just made mine a little bit more explicit and maybe a little bit more frightening because of the graphics. And of course, there was a joint goal. And the joint goal here is really important. Whether it's this game, where we want to donate $10,000 to the National Wildlife Foundation, or it's the real world, where we want to solve global warming, or it's the national debt, where we need to try and fix that, or it's poverty, or it's hunger, or it's whatever you want, there's a joint goal that everyone can individually buy into. And when you have those scenarios, when you have that ecosystem, for a moment, you have epic meaning. And this is another term borrowed from Jane McGonigal, and it's a great term. It's the idea that for a moment in a game, you are part of something epic. You are part of something so much bigger than yourself, and because of that, you are able to work incredibly hard. You are blissfully productive. How many of you guys still have your hearts racing a little bit from that? I know I'm sweating a bit just watching you, but you're working very hard, and yet you're happy doing it. Because you're fully engaged, and you're willing to work hard in this game to solve something which is great. And of course, the final part of the analogy is that it was a global problem with a local solution. 3,000 people affected, no one has the right resources, and yet in a very short amount of time, you can solve an incredibly complex problem with just 8 people around you and make it work very, very quickly. And that is awesome. And that's what I sort of wanted to show through this section on global warming, because can I solve